across all 75 counties this year and over the last several years. But this year in particular, I've heard from every single school administrator about the challenges they're facing in their schools with teen and preteen use of e-cigarettes and vaping. It has become a distraction, but more importantly, a danger for Arkansas students. And it's something that we must address now and hear directly from medical experts. And that's why the first panel this afternoon is so important. All of these educators ask me during these panels, or rather during these roundtable meetings, Leslie, what are we going to do about this problem? We are beside ourselves about what to do. They have implemented everything from fines to suspensions on kids, talking to their parents. And many of us understand that educating parents is the first step in addressing this challenge. As I left the house this morning, I looked at my 15-month-old daughter, Juliana, and I thought to myself, what will she be facing in 12 or 15 years? None of us saw this epidemic coming. We could not have imagined that in 2019, we would be addressing an entire generation becoming addicted to nicotine and how we get those young people unhooked from nicotine. We're taking a number of steps at the Attorney General's office to address this problem. In addition to these educational opportunities, we also are looking at enforcement actions. On Monday, I announced that we sent a letter to the CEO of eBay asking eBay to remove all electronic nicotine devices and products from its platform. Likewise, we sent letters to 100 online e-cigarette retailers informing them that it is illegal to ship products with tobacco into the state of Arkansas. So just to be clear, if you sell e-cigarette products to Arkansas's youth, there will be consequences. It's important that we hold those people accountable. But again, our biggest hurdle is ignorance and educating young people, educating teachers, educating parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. We are working against years of misinformation and misleading advertising regarding e-cigarettes from the manufacturers who have been telling people that it's so much safer than traditional cigarettes, when in fact, we don't know if it's safe at all. We must overtake this problem before this problem of vaping and e-cigarette use overtakes our youth. We must replace fiction with facts when it comes to vaping. And we must encourage Generation Z to be nic-free. I think many of these kids, whether here at Bentonville High School or across the state of Arkansas, would be shocked to learn that Juul, the name brand for e-cigarettes, it's now the Coca-Cola, the Xerox of e-cigarettes and vapes, that Juul is owned, 35% of Juul is owned by cigarette manufacturers. The same people who produce and manufacture cigarettes are the same folks who produce and manufacture something to get off of cigarettes. They've just learned how to disguise their products better. And we hope that parents and students across the state are listening. Because I know that if we want to see true change in our state, in our country, true change doesn't come from the State House. It comes from your own house. We've launched a statewide public service announcement regarding vaping that will be part of a video that will be shown in just a moment. And we hope to better reach more Arkansans through the use of this public service announcement, through the use of social media, and for all of us here today. So from today's summit and from Monday's summit, we'll be taking some of the best points, stories that move you, that impact you, and we'll be putting that together and sharing that with our Department of Education, sharing that with educators across the state so they can show that to young people and teens so we may stop this vaping epidemic before it takes over our young people. Thank you all, God bless you all, and I hope that you enjoy the summit. We'll be back after a while, but for now, here's this video. Thank you.
E-cigarettes, vape pens, Juuls. They're often marketed as safe alternatives to smoking, but their cool designs, fun flavors, and the fact that they're easy to hide means it's not only smokers who want them, it's kids. And for kids, they're definitely not safe. Teens should absolutely not use Juuls, e-cigarettes, or any similar products. Here's why. When kids use Juuls or other e-cigarettes, they're getting a big dose of nicotine. This disrupts their brain development. It changes the connections between brain cells, causing problems with learning, mood, and impulse control. It makes depression and anxiety worse.
And as any smoker can tell you, nicotine is highly addictive. That makes it very difficult to quit e-cigarettes. And vaping makes it much more likely that kids will smoke real cigarettes later. It's true that a few e-cigarette brands don't contain nicotine, but most of them do. And all of them contain other dangerous chemicals like these. Formaldehyde, which is found in glue and embalming fluid. Diacetyl, which causes lung disease. Benzene, that's a carcinogen linked to leukemia. Some tests have also found metal particles in the e-cigarette vapor. The devices themselves can also be unsafe. They can explode.
The long-term effects of using e-cigarettes are unknown.
And because there are no standards, we don't know the ingredients in these products.
We don't want children to take unnecessary risks with their health
and begin a lifelong addiction to nicotine.
So what's the story with vaping? Vaping devices like e-cigarettes or pods heat a liquid that usually contains nicotine and other chemicals to create an aerosol, also known as vapor, which is then inhaled into the lungs. Because vaping is relatively new, long-term research on how it impacts people's health is still ongoing. We do know that people who vape are choosing to inhale some pretty toxic chemicals in a way that hasn't been fully studied. Even though vaping products are marketed as a way to help quit smoking, data on their effectiveness is mixed. Because many contain high levels of nicotine, people are at risk of becoming more addicted. In fact, one study found that 63% of people who Juul didn't realize they were using nicotine at all. The bottom line, vaping may be promoted as being safer than smoking, but that doesn't mean it's safe.
I'm Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, and you're watching The Rutledge Report. Young children and teens are using e-cigarettes and vapes because they believe it's safe, when in reality, it's not. And parents don't even know because vapes are easy to disguise and they don't stink. Kids, don't get Nick sick and get the facts straight before you vape. At the Attorney General's office, we will do the fighting for you. Call us at 800-482-8982 or visit arkansasag.gov.
I thought I would start off just with a little bit of a status quo about what we know about vaping in the state of Arkansas. We know that 20% of our high school students are current users. Unfortunately, we know that 44% of our high school seniors have tried an e-cigarette at some point in their experience. We know that our middle school students have been exposed to not only the presence of e-cigarettes in their schools, but also the presence on the internet for advertising, clearly targeting and making attractive the use of e-cigarettes for younger and younger ages. And importantly, I think we're here today in part because we are starting to see the tip of the iceberg on the health effects, and we talked some about that. As of the first of the month, there have been over 1,000 hospitalizations for health-related pneumonitis, pneumonias, 18 deaths. Actually, those hospitalizations are across all of our 48 contiguous states, 18 deaths. We know that 70% of individuals with these are male, that 80% are under the age of 35, with 16% under the age of 18, 20% under the age of 20. So this is a new epidemic. I fear, and we have been talking about in the health circles, that we're seeing a sentinel event by hospitalization, but the actual breadth of the effect for those who are not hospitalized yet, we have no idea where the edge of that boundary starts.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to Arkansas Children's Hospital for hosting us. Thanks to the Attorney General for pulling all this together. This is a very important topic. And I'm so thankful and excited to have this panel here. As Julie was mentioning, it's really incredible. We have a small state, but we have such incredible resources in our healthcare professionals and the talent that UAMS and Children's Hospital and the other hospitals that are spread out throughout our state can bring to a topic like this, which is a really important topic. So I'm going to jump right in and start asking some questions to our panel, but I'd like to start with Dr. Patterson. Dr. Patterson is a cardiologist. He's also the chancellor for UAMS, and I'd just like to start by asking him, what's your thinking about vaping, and what are you seeing and hearing about this topic, and what would you like to tell the audience today?
Sure. Let's imagine a world in which, at that first moment when we knew that cigarette smoking was likely to lead to lung cancer and emphysema, we did what we are doing now. And imagine how much better off we, our state, would be if we had taken cigarette smoking as seriously as we are taking vaping right now. Now, I would also ask you to imagine a world 20 years from now in which we do nothing about vaping today. And imagine what that world will look like when a 12-year-old boy who starts vaping today is 32 years old and has been vaping for 20 years.
You know, it's really interesting to me. I talk to medical people quite a bit, but a lot of people might not know I'm also married. I have 3 daughters who are ages 8, 10, and 12. And so a lot of my on-the-ground medical information comes from them about what's happening in the schools and what's happening in the communities. And I was talking to them just recently about the vaping issue. And on their soccer teams, there's been some discussion about vaping, and the kids almost universally believe that when they are using a vaping device, they're just inhaling water. Just heated water. It's just a little bit of flavoring, a little bit of water, and it's completely safe, it's harmless. That's, to me, one of the biggest issues that we need to deal with in educating about this vaping issue. You're not just inhaling superheated water with a little bit of flavoring, you're inhaling a lot of other things.
And Dr. Ray, I may just ask you, are e-cigarettes really safer than smoking cigarettes?
All right. No, the direct answer is no. In fact, one e-cigarette, one juice that they put into the e-cigarette can contain as much nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes. And so that's a very common misconception that teenagers think that when they're using e-cigarettes that they're actually being safer and they're being healthier than if they were to smoke a cigarette. And so it's a common misconception that it's not.
Can e-cigarettes cause cancer in human use?
That's a great question. We know from our own studies, we've tested some of the e-liquids that contain nicotine to determine whether there are carcinogens in the e-liquid. And we know that there are. Our studies that we have done with our team here at UAMS have shown that, and there are a host of other studies that show that there are traces of carcinogens in these products. I mean, you saw in the video some of these constituents such as formaldehyde and benzene, which is in the nicotine salts that are used in products like Juuls. Those things cause cancer. What we don't know is there enough of the carcinogens and heavy metals in these e-liquids that would long-term cause lung cancer or other tobacco-related cancers. That's the big unknown in this particular situation. But we do know that in unheated e-liquids, there are traces of carcinogens. When you heat these products, of course, some of them can reach past the point of combustion because of the powers of the batteries, that you can get more harmful constituents, but we still are learning more about the long-term health consequences as it relates to cancer. We do know that studies have shown that there is an increased risk for heart disease, and those have been fairly conclusive.
We know that there are negative long-term consequences to long-term nicotine use. And the same way that cigarettes have nicotine in them, obviously these Juuls and vape products also have nicotine. And unfortunately, potentially at higher concentrations because they're unregulated. So not only does the liquid have a higher concentration in it, teens in particular are using them at a greater rate than just smoking cigarettes. So we know that there are long-term cardiovascular consequences, increased risk for coronary artery disease, increased risk for stroke, for neurovascular disease, as well as long-term risks for peripheral vascular disease. So the things that we have seen traditionally with cigarettes with long-term cardiovascular effects.
So everybody's brains develop up until they're 25 years old, and so you are introducing a substance that can have direct effects on the development of their brain at a very key time in their development. And so the long-term effects we see and have been studied extensively with nicotine is impulse control. They're also more apt to be addicted to substances and lead to further addiction down the road for them in their life. And then there's also other issues with memory and just overall impulse control. And so these teenagers are using these substances at a very important time in their brain development, and it's just not going to be done until they're long past the use of these substances.
I'd also like to add that the other problem with vaping, even if you use the devices as they're intended to be used, there's a risk of injury, acute injury related to using e-cigarettes. There have been reports of patients who've been burned, even children who've been burned or who have had explosions of those devices that have disfigured them for life. So that is a really serious consequence of using a device as it's intended to be used.
I think one thing that was not touched on would be secondhand smoke. I think that's probably also considered safe by a lot of people. There are studies that show you can still measure nicotine levels in secondhand smoke exposure from vaping. So even for people around you, it's not safe.
You know, I think that the question of sales of e-cigarettes is, an issue that frequently evokes, well, shouldn't people be allowed to make the choices that they want to make? And I get that, but the cost of the damage due to vaping and e-cigarettes is a cost that will be borne by everybody in this room. And I think we all have to ask ourselves, is the damage that is inflicted on our country, our state, our kids, the cost that we will incur, is that worth it, or is this frankly blood money? What would I tell the people in this audience? I would simply say that the idea of heating up nicotine and breathing it into your lungs as being a safer way of ingesting nicotine is like saying freebasing is a safer way of doing cocaine. It just doesn't make any sense.
A great metaphor that my colleague Dr. Bala gave me was people ask, they say, isn't this better for you than cigarettes? Isn't this better than tobacco? And I think to Dr. Pezzik's point, what Dr. Bala will often say is it's like being asked, is it better for me to jump out of a 3rd-story window or a 10th-story window? They're both going to hurt you and probably kill you, whether you're jumping out of the 3rd-story window or the 10th-story window. And so for someone who is smoking 2-3 packs of cigarettes a day, switching to vaping technologies and vaping products, there could be some benefit, although it's still bad for you. But if you're not smoking, and a lot of the marketing is directed towards young people with these flavors who aren't smoking, and it's being marketed as a natural, safe, healthy product, if you're not smoking, there can be tremendous risk and tremendous problems.
We have found through a number of different studies that have been conducted across the nation that e-cigarette use has led to the uptake of cigarettes among adolescents and young adults, and vice versa. Studies also show that those adolescents who initiate with a cigarette are also at increased risk for using e-cigarettes. So we see that e-cigarettes are a gateway drug for cigarettes and vice versa. And I think the biggest thing that we should be concerned about is these are all tobacco products and they all contain nicotine, and nicotine is highly addictive.
What's also concerning, I think, in children is consider vaping as a gateway drug. It was mentioned in the piece earlier that it typically will lead to use of other tobacco products. So children, middle school and up, are 4 times at higher risk of using another tobacco product. And over 10% of kids in high school will use multiple tobacco products as a result of vaping. So you have kind of both of those issues. You have a behavioral problem, and then you have the issues in development loans.
We've talked a little bit about the devices and their use as smoking cessation devices, but a lot of people are starting to use these technologies and putting other things into the substances. We've seen increased reports of people using THC or cannabis, other types of illicit substances, sometimes just other substances that they think might be interesting to superheat and breathe in. Who would like to, anyone want to comment about some of the other things that they're seeing or maybe have read about in the research that are being used in these devices in an illicit way that could be causing problems?
So I think the THC is probably one of the biggest things, and that in flavoring as well. If you look at reports of the lung damage, probably 75% of those are related to THC use through a vapor device.
Unfortunately, we are seeing not only lots of Juul standard liquid, Juul nicotine-based liquid, but I think we also see really on a daily basis in the emergency department marijuana use, and specifically now this vape cartridge, the black market THC oil. And again, for some of the same reasons that cigarettes are a little bit stigmatized, that your breath smells and they make your clothes stink and whatnot, the marijuana has been stigmatized in the same way by smoking marijuana. Now that stigma is somewhat removed, the same way it is with vape cartridges, the same way people using THC cartridges. Unfortunately, there is no regulation. We don't know what's in these cartridges. We don't know, again, as Dr. Reed was saying, some of the hashish oils and then some of the carrier oils that are being used that can cause lung injury.
You know, a lot of the things that are being put into these devices are not FDA approved, and it's important for people to realize that things like CBD, things like these other substances are regulated like supplements and not like pharmaceuticals. So even if these things are sold at a pharmacy, you walk into a pharmacy and you purchase your prescription or whatever, the pills or the things that you're buying from the pharmacist have gone through a rigorous program to make sure that not only they're safe for you, but the dose that you're receiving is appropriate and safe for you. If you're buying a supplement, what we're finding is when we take these supplements off the shelf and we run tests on them, these things are oftentimes the substance that they're supposed to have in there, they don't even they don't even have it in the substance that they're testing. But sometimes the dose of that chemical is either super high or super low, and so you don't really know what you're getting. I'd like to get some feedback now from one of our pediatricians and Dr. Tamara Perry, who deals with a lot of kids and kids' issues. What are you seeing in your practice, and what are you hearing from folks about the vaping issue? Are you getting a lot of questions about it, and what sort of things are you discussing with them?
Thank you, Greg. That's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, I'm not getting a lot of questions from parents. I think that is one of the issues that we really have to face, is that parents are oftentimes very unaware of what's actually going on with their children. One of the major problems with vaping or juuling is that it's very inconspicuous. I mean, people can do it and you won't know it. I mean, you can be in the same room with them and they can vape, or they can just go in the other, in another room close by, and your kids can be doing that right there in your home and you would never know it. And so if you're not directly asking the questions to your patients, if you're a provider, or to your children, if you're a parent, then you may not be aware of a problem that is really a serious problem. I think one of the very important things for us to know as parents is that Juul and other vaping products can contain up to the nicotine amount that is equal to 20 cigarettes. And if you have a child that's juuling or vaping one pod in one day, that's the equivalent of smoking 20 cigarettes. And that's a huge problem that parents are not aware of. We have to ask directed questions of our kids, whether they're our biological children, or we're providers, or teachers. Are you juuling? Are you vaping? Are you using e-cigarettes? You need to know the language. You can't ask them generic questions. Are you smoking? Because they don't really think of juuling or vaping as smoking. They don't think that it's nicotine, so they don't feel like that they are tobacco. They're exposed to tobacco. So you really have to ask those specific questions. And unfortunately, parents are not asking a lot of questions, so we have to bring it up. We have to raise it as a public health issue. I think asking direct questions, not beating around the bush, but ask those direct questions. Are you using, and list the products. I mean, we have to educate ourselves about the names of these products, as well as the slang that the kids are using. But we also have to be really careful not to do it in a way that will make them feel like you're blaming them, because I really feel like a lot of what we're seeing is these children are victims of marketing, and they feel like, or felt like when they started, that it was completely innocent. They were just, vaping some flavors, or, it was appealing to them because of the flavoring, and they oftentimes don't realize the harmful chemicals or nicotine content of the things that they're vaping. So we have to inform them that, it's not their fault that they tried it or that they were enticed by it, but that we want to help them, and we want to inform them of the dangers. Because we don't want to see those health consequences that Dr. Patterson pointed out 20 or 10 or 5 years from now. We don't know what consequences we'll see with our children.
So first off, I've had parents tell me that they keep catching an aroma that smells very nice, but they can't figure out where it's coming from. That's one of the most common things I've heard from some of the parents that we found later, that the teenagers were vaping. If you're getting orders to your house that you didn't order, because this is how we're, especially in Arkansas, where it is legal to be transporting it into our state, they're ordering it online, and a lot of times often under the parent's own account, and so things are getting ordered and arriving to the house before the parents even know about it. Also, just symptomatically, it's a substance abuse, it's nicotine, so there can be some behavioral changes to different friend groups, isolating themselves more, not being as open with you about things. And then as far as like symptoms go, you know, if there's cough, if there's any respiratory illness, and you've suspected it, you need to have that kind of high up in your mind that maybe there's something going on in your home. The other thing is that they showed pictures earlier in that video of the various devices. They can look like common household items, and so if your teenager's carrying around something that doesn't seem like something they should be carrying around all the time, like a Sharpie or a USB drive, I mean, you might start asking a few questions about why do you need a Sharpie all the time? Why do you need a USB drive all the time? So first off, I always tell parents, get educated yourself. So your kids will know some aspect about vaping, even if they're not vaping themselves. But like we said, up to almost 40% of high schoolers admitted to vaping at least once. So you need to be educated in order to have an educated conversation with your children. And there's amazing websites online, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Honestly, just Googling, looking for facts on vaping and vaping safety, you can learn a ton just about vaping devices, what kind of things go in vaping devices, and what to look for in your child as far as whether they're using or not. Once you're educated, then I just tell parents to use the surroundings around you to bring it up, because they're just people. I know that they're, you know, sometimes can be a little resistant to talking to their parents about things, but it's all over the media right now. You can walk down the street and see an adult or another teenager vaping. I say use those opportunities. Oh, what is that? Oh, that's a vaping device. Do you know what that is? Do you know what's in the vaping device? Have you ever tried it? Have your kids ever, you know, have your friends ever tried it? Then that just opens up the discussion. If you can just have a very open discussion with your teenager, then you may be able to actually have a good conversation about what it is, the risks that you're taking by doing those devices and using the vapors that they're using in those vaping devices. So.
Some of them are clearly marketed towards kids. Cotton candy, gummy bear. I've even heard of a Lucky Charms cereal flavor. I mean, clearly this is not the demographic that ends up in my cancer clinic after smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 30 or 40 years. So I really question the intent of some of those flavors, and also the safety of them. You know, if we look at medications to treat a problem, they don't come in flavors. I mean, except for pediatrics. We have, you know, bubblegum flavored amoxicillin or cherry flavored cough syrup. We have different things to help kids, but if we're treating adults, targeting adults, trying to treat a problem, I don't see flavors as a necessary ingredient in there. And so if it's not necessary, and then there's so many questions about what those products are, what they turn into, what they break down into, I really wonder about the value and the risk benefit.
Yes, there is ample research showing that it's really the flavors that attract kids, because whoever is smoking cigarettes as an adult, well, they are used to tobacco flavor. So sure, they'll be saying that it's nice to have something else that isn't tobacco flavor, but all the research when you ask kids, one of the main answers that they give why they tried it is that the flavors were so appealing. And I believe the latest count of it keeps increasing is that there are 15,000 different flavors.
Wow. In terms of intention of Juul and the other vaping companies, they will tell you, no, we're not targeting children. There's no targeted campaign. Let's be honest. Let's just put it out there. They're making flavors like bubblegum and cream and mint chocolate, things that an adult smoker is not necessarily going to be interested in. The honest truth is these companies know if they can get the teenager or the younger adolescent addicted to nicotine, they're going to be addicted to that substance, whether in a vaping form or in a cigarette form, and they're going to have customers for life. So the honesty component about whether it's an orthodox use or an unorthodox use, the intention of these companies is to create addicts and to create lifelong customers.
You know, I think we had literally decades of misinformation, disinformation from the tobacco industry as evidence built. And we hear this argument that there's no evidence that this causes harm. And I go back, well, it rationally should cause harm. So how should we actually build that evidence base going forward? And I think we're going to get thrown a curveball too, as people look for a specific substance, an oil or a topic. I think it's the device itself and the delivery mechanism that enables all of these different things to be experimented with that will cause harm. So I really do think the message is it's the device, not the liquid, not the oil, not the container, it's the device, it's the vector.
In addition to a physician, I'm the mother of 3 teenagers. So I would say to the retailers, the manufacturers, to stop marketing these products to my children, period.
As we've all noted and are experiencing, this crisis just came on like a tsunami. And that's why we thought it was important to bring together panelists talking about solutions, whether it's solutions at our schools or possible solutions to the law. But none of us have a silver bullet to stop this crisis. It's going to take all of us working together and hearing from the schools what may be working at one of these schools may work at yours, if you're a school administrator, or laws that we've seen being passed or implemented in other states. It may be something that we've considered, but we also wanted to have our state legislator, who's also, as Julie noted in his bio, a member of the medical community, talking about that.
I know 3 years ago, I could not have told you what a dab pen was or a Juul or anything like that. And now we've been slapped upside the head, it feels like, with this epidemic with our kids. And you listen to the statistics, we're looking at 50% of our kids trying this stuff. And so, yeah, it's there. It's there. And so the question is now, what are we going to do about that? And I think Dr. Perry really hit it home whenever she mentioned earlier, she's not being asked these questions. She is not being asked. And so I think that the education piece that our community and our parents need to know, they don't understand, the teachers, the administrators that are in the buildings every day that see what we're dealing with. The community at large has no idea, in my opinion. And so that's why I think this is the message that you're sending out is great. And so thank you for doing that.
And I just want to ask real quick, because you're with the Cabot schools. How many students do you all have in Cabot schools?
Currently, Cabot Schools has 10,342.
So, larger than the town I grew up in, the number of students that you all work with on a daily basis. What's the youngest kid, or maybe, how prevalent is it that you have teachers coming to you?
So I think I mentioned to you at a roundtable discussion several weeks ago, we have students as young as 10 years old that have dealt with this, 5th graders.
Fantastic. Next, Jennifer is a deputy of Saline County Sheriff's Office, but she also serves as a school resource officer with the Bauxite schools. And talk to us about what you're seeing.
Our school district has 1,700 students, and I'm the school resource officer for the elementary school, middle school, and the high school. And it's prevalent in our high school. Last week, our high school assistant principal and myself spent all day Wednesday. When I say all day, I mean from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3:30 that afternoon. And all we did was deal with students who were vaping. And we suspended 8 students. And it is so prevalent that these kids just are not understanding the dangers, and they're just, they want to tell you, oh no, I'm not vaping. Yeah, you are, we're catching you. And what they're saying is, well, it's just flavored vapor. And what's so frustrating for us is when we're catching them, we're getting blueberry, watermelon crush, and we got one student who had sweetened cereal milk. tell me they're not vaping, or tell me they're not directly marketing to our children. I don't know a Marlboro cigarette that's tasting like sweetened cigarette, or sweetened cereal milk. I mean, these cigarettes taste like tobacco. These vapes are directly being marketed to our kids, and that's what's so frustrating, is they're thinking they're just vaping flavors, and they're not.
2 years ago, we had an ambulance show up at Cabot High School. It was because a kid, we weren't exactly sure what was going on, but it was reported to us by friends that they were Nick sick. We never heard that before. What is Nick sick? Well, that's what the kids call it, being Nick sick. And then we talk about the number of cigarettes, 20 in a pod, that can be ingested. Somebody can do that almost immediately. That's what that was. It was the amount of nicotine that had gone into the student's body and caused a horrible reaction for them that we had to call the ambulance for that. And we had no idea what Nick sick was, but it's part of their lingo, it's part of what they talk. And that's the hard part even for teachers and administrators. And I see a lot of shaking heads out there, is that things change so fast for us. And you're on the front lines every day. You see it. You're dealing with it in your classrooms and in your schools. But sometimes it's hard for us to even know what the new thing is. You know, what's the new dab pen, or what is the new pod with THC? It's unbelievable.
There's obviously definitely an increase. 5 years ago when I started here, it was all about, we had a smoking bridge. We'd catch them out there every morning smoking. Now they're all transitioning to vaping. All the way down to, from obviously seniors, 17, 18, all the way down to 13, 14 in our junior highs. We've caught them on the buses that get reported there. So it's just a major increase. The key to it is they're reading, there's nothing on these bottles, there's nothing saying what's in them, but they're getting the information that's getting passed on from team to team that, not really doing any research on it. They just, my buddy said this is safe, it doesn't have any nicotine in it. They have no concerns, no regard for it. They believe it's just, flavored water, flavored oil, that nothing's gonna hurt them.
Our school board has really been proactive in the things that they're doing by looking at what kind of education pieces can we put in place for these kids. We have a drug resistance program. We've had that for the last several years. But as part of that, we've tweaked that this year so that now we're spending several weeks just on vaping and what the dangers of that are. So I can't wait to take some of this information back with me and share that with the educators that are writing that curriculum for our kids. And that's just something we do for all of our fifth graders. Another thing that our school board has done, and they're kind of their foresight for this education piece, is we saw it last year where we had students as young as fifth grade that were dabbling in this with the vape pens and the jewelry. So we thought, what can we do? We have an alternative learning structure through a conversion charter school. So we were not able last year to accept students who were in fifth or sixth grade, but we did some tweaking to that, applied to DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, in order to move that program down to fifth and sixth grade students. So now when we see a student that is involved in this a certain number of times, we actually remove that student from the school environment and send them to an alternative education, which is just for fifth and sixth graders. And it's used to give them counseling on decision making, to educate them about the dangers of what they're participating in, but also that removal from campus gives us some time to find out what's going on in their lives and maybe even help the family make better decisions as well. So that's one of the things that our school board put in place for this school year.
My job is to really, develop a rapport with these kids. I'm not there just to be a law enforcement officer at our schools. I'm there to develop a relationship with them, and I'm asking them, the school gives the punishment. First offense is 3-day out of school suspension, and I'm so grateful that I've got an administration that backs this up, and a school board that understands how important and how dangerous vaping is. once the punishment is dealt out, I just talk to them. I'm like, where are you getting these things? eBay, Amazon. Well, is there, are you checking that you're over 21? No. And they'll pull it up and just start typing. These things look like mermaid tails with all pretty colors. They're geared to our kids. And that's what's so frustrating. And I'm asking these children, are you addicted to nicotine? Or are you doing it to be cool? I'm just doing it to be cool to fit in. So there's two different discussions we need to be having with our children. What makes you think that you have to do this to be cool? And then on the other aspect is when they do say, I'm addicted to nicotine, okay, the other avenue that we need to take is, what do we need to do to help these children get off nicotine?
Yeah, of course. We have parents that come in and say, that's mine, I'm the one that paid for it, I gave it to them so they wouldn't be smoking cigarettes. We've had that happen before. We've been lucky enough in Lonoke County to partner with the prosecuting attorney's office starting last April, so that we are now, it's part of our handbook and has been for years, that we make a report to a legal authority on offense number 1, along with the suspension. Ours is 3 days of in-school suspension, and the tobacco cessation program they have to complete during that 3 days of in-school suspension. So as part of that, though, we've always been in our handbook that we make a legal referral, but until this past March or April, nothing ever came of that. There was never anything done with it other than we told an officer or SRO or whoever it was that, hey, this student had cigarettes on them or they had a vape. That changed in last March or last April. Now those students are now receiving citations on their first offense. And Chuck Graham's office has done a fantastic job partnering with us and actually seeing those through so that these kids and these parents actually end up in front of a judge with a court date so that there are consequences and they're seeing that it is a lot bigger deal than just the school official calling and telling them, hey, we're keeping your date. And now we turn that over to the police. They've been cited for it. That goes to the police department.
Last year was kind of okay, you vaped and you get this day of in school. The next time you do it, you get this day of in school. But now our policies as far as on campus are progressive. So you're getting 3 days of in-school suspension, and the next time you're getting 4 days of in-school suspension, and you can be suspended or given a change of placement with enough times being caught with a vape. As far as athletics in our community, we have an athletic code book, and we have different levels, level 1 through level 4. And vaping, or if you're caught with a vape, it's a level 2 infraction, which is a 5-day suspension, up to a 5-day suspension. You can miss games. You're going to get extra conditioning, and in our handbook, a level 2 infraction, the head coach is going to meet with the family, the athletic director is going to meet with the family. So the policies have changed because of what we've seen.
Tobacco includes not only the tobacco product itself and the vape products, but it also includes all the component parts of it. You can't sell cigarette papers to a minor. You can't sell the cartridge, the vaping device to a minor. In Arkansas, retailers take that seriously because they can lose their license. You can lose your license to sell alcohol, or you can lose your license to sell tobacco. And you see this particularly there are some places I go to, I get carded if I want to buy a beer. They take this very seriously. The problem you run into...
Let's just all take that in for a moment.
Barely legal, right here, barely legal. And part of the problem, though, is you've got a generation that has grown up digitally. They buy things online. I can't tell you the last time my son walked into a store and bought me a Christmas gift, or it all comes in Amazon packages. And so these kids are used to buying things online, and that is where the policing gets very difficult. When you walk into a store, they're going to ask you for your ID. They're going to run your ID through a scanner that's going to verify that it's a valid ID and you are who you are. You don't have those kind of processes on some websites, and you have websites that don't put the proper controls in place to ensure that they're not selling to a minor. The process has to be something more than, are you over 19 or under 19? And so these retailers that are selling to the youth and shipping it, into Arkansas, they're violating Arkansas law, and the Attorney General has the office has the ability to start enforcement actions against them. Violating that Arkansas law violates the Arkansas Deceptive Trade Practice Act, and it's up to $10,000 per violation. Fairly stiff penalties. You sell 10 devices into Arkansas, that's 10 times $10,000 the way we view it. And so we've undertaken to identify which of these online sellers there are, and on Monday your office sent out to 100 different online retailers enforcement advisories telling them they are not to sell to minors in Arkansas. They need to put in place processes that verify the identity and the age of the individual trying to buy online. They need to put processes in place where gift cards, Visa gift cards and other type gift cards aren't used to purchase the products online. They need to put processes in place that you can't buy a product with somebody else's credit card. You can't have the person it's being shipped to and the credit card be mama, daddy, or somebody else. They've got to put those processes in place. One other thing about Arkansas law, though, and it's a belts and suspenders approach to making sure kids don't get tobacco products, is it is illegal to ship tobacco products, period, into the state of Arkansas. We've reached out to those 100 companies. You shouldn't ship to anybody in the state of Arkansas, regardless of your age verification process, because it's illegal. It's that belt and suspenders approach. So we're taking that action towards the individuals that's their business. We've also, your office on Monday, you sent a letter to the president of eBay. We have found a number of online suppliers to get around the age verification process by selling their product over platforms like eBay. And we continue to look at those platforms. And we're going to reach out to those platforms like Amazon and Wish and others to remind them that they need to put the processes in place to avoid the shipment of tobacco and vape products to minors in Arkansas. And then one other thing that we are going to be seeking is not to allow bulk purchases, whether at an Arkansas retail store. 20% of the product that finds its way to minors comes from them purchasing it directly. 80% is they get it from somebody else. And so we've got to stop the bulk sales. We've got to stop the bulk sales not only at the brick and mortar stores here in Arkansas, but on online sales as well. And so that's what the enforcement actions we're taking to stop sales to minors. And then as part of a longer term enforcement, we're looking at the people that created this problem. Like the tobacco companies, the companies that produce and sell these vape products haven't been forthright in telling the public about the dangers of their product. And they're selling an addictive product. It's just in the same way that tobacco companies. And so they have to be held accountable for marketing to young people. Back in the day it was Joe Camel. Today they use social influencers to try and encourage young people.
As far as legislative solutions, I kind of divide those up in my head. I try to be organized in how I think about them. I think I said I had 3 categories the other day. I thought of maybe a 4th, but the first category I think of with legislative solutions is preventing the initiation by our youth of starting to begin with, right? And so for me, part of that is we have to get out there and ban these flavors. I mean, that has to stop. We can't have flavored products. That's strictly geared to trying to get an entry-level audience in, whether it's sweet cereal flavored or cotton candy flavor or whatever the flavor may be. We also have to work towards stopping and preventing the ads geared toward our kids, the same way we do with the cigarettes and tobacco products. We need to do the best we can to try to take steps to prevent those ads from being out there where children can look at them and see them. And then a key component too is education. We have to do the things that we need to do to educate our youth that this is dangerous. I think back to my 5th grade year, and there was a campaign back then to really, tout the dangers of tobacco. And I can remember my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Fields, coming in with this lung that had been, a tobacco lung, and it was black and tarry, and the vision and image of that as a 5th grader really stuck in my head. And to this day, when I see someone smoking, I think about bad image. And we need to do things legislatively to support education in our schools at an early age. As you mentioned, we're seeing this at 13, 12. By that time, it's too late. We need to let our children understand that this is dangerous. This can kill you, and get that message out early. I think preventing accessibility is another category, which I appreciate your comments on Tobacco 21. I'm real proud of that piece of legislation. I'm proud that we as a state were able to get that accomplished. That's been proven to be a very effective method in limiting access to youth by raising the age to 21. Very few 13-year-olds know 21-year-olds that can purchase tobacco for them, but they do know 18-year-olds. So I'm grateful for that. I think the other thing that's really sensitive to, the youth are really sensitive to, is price point. So as you raise the price point of these products, it limits their ability to purchase them. And so we need to do some things with the tax. Right now, I think it was mentioned that it's not taxed like other tobacco products. The truth is it's not taxed at all. There's no tax at all on e-cigarettes in our state. There's only a handful of states across the nation which currently tax e-cigarette products. And if we're going to say as a society that we should be taxing tobacco products, then we should also be taxing e-cigarette products. And so I think it's important for us as a legislator to step up and tax e-cigarettes the right way. I think it's important for us to support our enforcement officers. That's the other thing I thought of after our last session. I think anything we can do as a legislative body to tighten up the fines for people that are selling these to our youth, the challenge of trying to limit how things are sold over the black market and how they're coming into our state, I think that's important. And then finally, I think it's important not to lose sight of cessation. It's easy for us to look at an 18-year-old who's vaping, who may have been vaping for 2 years, and say quit. These guys are addicts. They're addicted to this nicotine. As a youth, as a physician, I can tell you that science will tell us the way we become addicted is by forming nicotine receptors in our brain. All of us have a certain number of those. You continue to form more of those up until about the age of 25. And so when we're exposing 13, 14-year-old kids to nicotine, physiologically, they're producing more nicotine receptors in response to the nicotine they're seeing. So they're more likely to become addicted than the 40-year-old that just starts up. And so this is a real problem for our youth as well. We need to be sympathetic and empathetic with the idea that these guys are addicts too to this nicotine. And so whatever we can do as a legislative body to support cessation, I think we ought to be looking at that as well.
These kids today are going to have health problems that we can't imagine. As I said, who would have thought that this is what we would be addressing in 2019? And so, as you all know, and I know, government doesn't always move at the pace that we would like for it to. And so we need parents to help us protect their kids. We're going to do absolutely everything we can to protect your children, but we need parents, aunts and uncles and grandparents. I know our school administrators do, but we need all of us working together to educate ourselves and to educate young people about these problems so we can protect our kids.